Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so excited to have you here at the Nest Egg Builder Show. And today we're very excited because we have Edmund Chien or Chen. I said your name incorrectly. And Aaron will correct me, which is cool. I like to say people's names right because I have a very difficult last name for most people. And we are so excited and thrilled to have you. And Aaron, would you please introduce Edmund?
Hello, everyone. And I just want to say this. I met Edmund last year. We met each other when we had a Zoom call. And I'm telling you guys, please have your pen and paper ready. He's going to blow your mind for a whole hour. Edmund is an expert. He was in the Canadian Army Paratrooper. And he went to the financial industry, and now he's a capital raises coach, and he has some big names as clients. And I'm telling you, everybody that I've talked to gave some great reviews. So if you ever want to just have, I'm just telling you guys, you're going to get your mind blown. Edmund, please take the stage, sir.
Thanks, Aaron. It's always a pleasure hearing from you, and thank you very much for the kind words. So that people get an interesting sort of background on me. Peggy was talking about my last name. Interestingly enough, I don't know how many people actually know this, but in Chinese, my last name is the actual character for money is my last name, right? So it's a vocational last name. So I'm actually doing what my blood has done, my ancestry has done, which is being a financial professional. And it was kind of like getting dragged into it. And I did it for almost 20 years. I was a senior partner of a private equity firm, which is essentially was a multifamily family office. So some of the things that we would like to talk about today, Peggy said to maybe spend about 15 minutes talking a little bit about legacy planning, talk a little bit about legacy planning from the perspective of family office. What does that actually mean? And what are some of the challenges that you're going to face if you encounter a family office or you want to develop a family office for yourself? So some of the things that we see, the first thing that we're going to talk about is the breakdown in defining what a family office is. There's really two major definitions of a family office. Some argue that there's three, right? So the two major definitions of a family office is a wealthy family that is so wealthy that has amassed so much wealth that they can hire professionals full-time to work in their for managing their wealth, or work in their trust, or managing their trust, and foundation together. So that is a really well-established family office. A single family office is what we call, right? So like the Hiltons, for an example, would be a significant American family office. Then there's a multi-family family office where you have a group of professionals, like an investment firm that manages high net worth money. And there's people that are in a slightly different category, maybe like 10 million to 50 million. Anything where you're going to find people that have outlived or have amassed a net worth that is going to exceed their livelihood or their lifetime, right? So that starts to get into legacy planning. So legacy planning is usually the beginning of a family office. The third part that people some talk about, or the third kind of family office, is a family office where their net worth is still tied in significantly with an operating company. So it's a family owned and operated company that's a big part of their business, is a big part of their net worth. So for me, I worked in a multi-family family office, and I've worked for 3 different families inside their operating companies, right? So that the significant part of their net worth was part of that operating. So I worked in those 2 areas. One of the biggest challenges or the first challenge that you've got to look at to overcome, whether you're going to create a family office yourself or you're going to manage it for somebody else, is this terminology that's really well known in the family office circle called shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. Okay, so how many people have heard that term, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves? Just raise your hands of people that their screens are on. Okay, so I'm going to explain, why this happens or what this is. All right, so shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves is the first challenge that you're going to encounter. And what it basically means is that the person that made the wealth, so the first generation that amassed the family wealth, it's going to dissipate and have an incredibly high percentage by the 3rd generation to disappear. So the entire family wealth will go from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. So by the 3rd generation, it's almost 90% chance that the family wealth is going to go to nothing or back to zero, right? And start back from scratch, right? So only 10% make it. So some say like 13%, somewhere around 10 to 13%, some in that percentage. If you go to the fourth generation, it only goes up to 3%. So there's almost a 97% chance that this family will become a regular family again in 4 generations. So that's the first challenge that a family office manager needs to get over. And how do we understand why this phenomenon happens? And after you understand that, then you can start to get a better idea of how to combat that. All right. So one of the things that come down to it is that I've managed money for $25 million lottery winner. And people say, wow, that sounds so amazing. It has been one of the most challenging clients that I've ever had. And the reason comes down to this, is that client's net worth or finances far exceeds their money mindset. So my client was a gardener, so is a day laborer, and he won a $25 million lottery, and now he couldn't tell the difference between a wise investment and a poor investment. There's also another statistic that says that lottery winners have the highest potential out of all the millionaires. Lottery winners have the highest potential or percentage to declare bankruptcy within 3 years. And that's because their money mindset cannot handle their wealth. It's kind of like a cup. So it's either your money mindset is like a cup with cracks and holes in it, and it's a small cup. And you try to dump $25 million into it, it can't hold it, and it'll just disappear. And that's kind of what ends up happening is you're trying to explain to this client wise investment decisions, and he can't tell the difference. This is also a phenomenon that happens in pro sports. Right, so pro athletes, you'll have NFL players in their 20s that make multi-million dollars. Also, the same thing is when they retire from pro ball, they also have a very high percentage of becoming broke, going back to nothing. It's because they don't have the right money mindset. So this is my explanation of why this happens, and this term shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves happens. It's because the person that made the money has grown over time to develop the right money mindset to be able to handle millions of dollars. But then the second generation has a little less of a chance because they're not developing the proper money mindset. And then by the third generation, it gets worse. And by the fourth generation, it's pretty much gone, right? So as a family office manager, or if you're managing your own family office, if you want to be in the 10% that make it, it's being able to develop in your family or in the family a proper money mindset among the generations going forward. So how does this happen? How do you do this? The first thing that is incredibly important, that I'd like to introduce everybody to, is it's incredibly important to develop what we call a family constitution. So I talk to a lot of wealthy clients that are looking at their legacy, and they start off with, first I would check off, do you have a will? And then when they create a will, I go through that will, and for me, I can assess, or I can tell some of the values that they have. Then you tell the patriarch, it's like, well, it's going to be very difficult to understand the full core or the soul of your intent just reading your will, because it's not really a breathing document. There's motivations behind the direction of your will, an explanation behind that. It's kind of like the American Constitution. What are the true values or the core values that this money was made? And what is the core values I would like the family to continue on to have? What are some things that are very important to you? They could be religious beliefs, they could be values, they could be things like helping other people. How did you, and it can be even like your origin story. So I'm currently getting my dad to write these things, because I explained to my father and I say, hey, Dad, you've created your will. That's great. Take a look at your grandkids. If you try to explain to them, his grandkids are anywhere from 13 to 1 year old. Right? He's got 6 grandkids, right? So I said, well, if you try to explain it to these kids, they won't understand it. And you may not be around when they become adults. So put it down on paper. Talk about your entire origin story, how you came from Hong Kong, with $100 in your pocket, and how it turned into this wealth, and what are the values, and how did you do it? And what is the proper values and the mindset that you had? His thing was, he was very heavy on education. It's really important for him. So he wanted to write those things down. Oh, you got to write these things down in a family constitution. You got to write this down in a message to your adult grandkids so that we can read it out to them as they start to get, when you're gone and they start to draw from this trust. It could be things that are very important. There's another concept that I think is also very important with money mindset. And there's a big part of philanthropy and giving back. And a lot of successful family offices will do this. So one of the things that I encouraged a lot of families to do is, on top of having your family operating company or holding company or trust, alongside of that is also to establish a family foundation. And then the family foundation should be no less than 1/10 of the wealth of the overall family. All right. So whatever the trust is, or the opco holding company. And I think most people would believe in tithing. Right. So you can do this on a corporate scale as well, on a family corporate scale. And I think it's really important for wealthy families to give back, because what it does is it starts to develop the proper money mindset. So you combine the foundation along with your family constitution and the values that you hope your future generations will live by. So some of the things that I've done is I've established certain criteria for the family. And I've had a lot of these challenges where some of my clients had said, hey, Ed, that I've already got money mindset taken care of. I was like, okay, how are you going to do it? It's like, I'm going to spend my last dollar on my deathbed, and every single one of my dollars is going to go to a charity, and my kids are going to get nothing, and they're going to have to make it themselves. I was like, well, isn't that a little on the harsh side? And your families have to start from square one again? It's like, you did so much. It's like, well, I don't want to spoil my children. It's like, I had to pull up my bootstraps, and I want them to do the same thing. That's the best thing I can give them, is to give them nothing, because then they can make it. It's like, well, you know, it's a harsh world out there. Like, there's a lot of storms. So I came up with a solution for them. I said, well, why don't you write down not only your family constitution, but you can write in things like this and say that, how do you keep it fair for all the people all the family members that would draw from your trust? One of the things that you can do is you can say that for every dollar of, say, W-2 that you create, or every dollar of income, it doesn't have to be W-2, like K1 something, but every dollar of income that you create, you can take $1 out of the trust. So if you want to go and barely work and get a paper route or work at some low-end job and you make $30,000 a year, well, here's your other $30,000. So you just give them a leg up. But if someone wants to become a neurosurgeon and pushes themselves to become a neurosurgeon, you'll double their income. All right. So you just make their life incredibly easy. So make their knife twice as sharp, so it can cut through the challenges of the world twice as fast. And it just gives your family a little bit of advantage, but doesn't make it where it's completely free and they just become trust fund kids. Is to put some kind of criteria to encourage them to succeed. And if one decides that he wants to sit on a couch and barely do anything, then they get barely any money off the trust. If somebody wants to push themselves and build a big business, then you'll double their income, right? So it's to keep that motivation going. But then another component I would say that is, make sure, and you'll see this for larger family offices, make sure that if they want to take $1 out of the trust, for every dollar, they have to take 10 cents out of a foundation and give it to somebody else. They can't give it to themselves. It has to be given to somebody else. And this is where you'll see in things like the royals, for an example. Every single royal in Britain has a charity that they support. And that's part of that component. That's a family office intent, where you want your children to understand the value of money, but understand and not to become spoiled, to see that there's people in the world that also need assistance and need help. So what do you care about? Go sit on that board. And when you sit on that board, go and donate the actual funds, and here's the funds to do it. And we want you to be immersed in that world so that you're not completely just oblivious to some of the challenges that the world has. That is also helpful for things like money mindset. So just to quickly sum up, basically some of the major challenges, it's a very quick introduction to things. It's to take a look and understand that one of the challenges that you'll find in family office is windfall funds, just like a lottery or just like pro ballers. It's that you're going to exceed, or there's a high potential that the finances that come into the next generations will exceed their money mindset. So the way that you help a family, or the way that you help your family get into the top 10% of family offices that succeed, is to focus more on the money mindset than to train them on how to be able to handle that money. And it's more than just learning how to make it, because your skill set was, the patriarch was learning how to make it. It's a completely different mindset and skill set of how to keep it and get it to the next level. So that's another level where a money manager like me provides that value to show you. I'll show you how to get to the next stages now. You've made the hard part, which is making the money. Now the hard part is keeping the money and how to keep it for multi-generations. Right. So that's pretty much what I have. I guess, Peggy, it's back to you. Maybe we have some questions. I think that's what we wanted to do next.
Well, yeah, I have a couple if I might lead off, but Seema's already got her hand up. So let's start with Seema.
Oh my God, I adore this young man.
I knew you would.
Thank you.
So glad you're here.
First of all, so you're a Canadian, right?
Yes, I'm in Toronto.
Good. So we are 3 Canadians here, and we are awesome, all of us. Yeah. Yes. I grew up in Western Canada. So that is the first brownie point. And then I know that Peggy and I have talked about legacy, family legacy, family planning. And what you said about your father, since I left India when I was young, but I'm still a first generation immigrant, and I know my morals, values. I can trace my history back 400 years, and I know what my family stands for. But my girls were born and brought up here. They don't give a damn, because that's the good part of being in the US. It doesn't matter where you came from, so you can do well regardless of where you came from. But for snobs like me, if you have a strong pedigree, you're proud of it. But so that was really great what you said about the family constitution. And if you have the money, write down what are your thoughts. Of course, if I can come up with 10 million plus, problem would be my husband and I would not agree on the family constitution. He would want to include other family members, and I don't like any of them. So that'd be a huge issue. But we can work on that. But thank you. This is such a great topic, because I've been thinking about it. I've talked to Peggy for a few times. I've listened to other people, and it's not easy to explain. I've always known that lottery winners and football players like O.J. Simpson haven't been able to hang on to the money, and people always quote them as examples. So thank you. I shall shut up now.
So
thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Constitution. Can you, we know, the United States has a constitution, but being applied to a family office, I don't think people really understand. I wondered if you could explain a little bit about how that works. And then you're talking about family getting matching funds. Who's going to run this? So those two questions, if you would address them.
Sure. So the first one is, and the reason why I don't go into specifics about creating a family constitution is because the constitutions are going to be as unique as the different family dynamics. So you have a certain value system, you have a certain way of thinking that was able to help you amass that wealth. So that's one of the keys. And I think that's really important to add that into the family constitution. This is how this money was made. And this is how I made it with this mindset. And I would hope that you would continue on with this mindset. And so one of the things that I'm asking my dad to do is reach as far back as he can remember. So I don't have the luxury of talking to my great grandfather, but there's little snippets of what my dad can remember. It's like, well, we need to write that down before you're gone, because I don't know that. And if you're gone, then my kids definitely won't learn it. And there's little snippets of things that my dad sort of knew about his grandfather and said, please write that down. This is the beginnings. This is the origin story of the Chien family. And then I know a little bit about what my grandfather did. My grandfather was financial. He was in insurance. So he worked for AIG. And so it's like, write that down. And then financial skipped a generation. So my father and my uncles, they didn't get into finance, but then it came back to me. So I'm actually doing what my grandfather did. And when I was in insurance, when I got licensed for insurance, it changed my perspective, because my grandfather had been long gone after that, like by the time I got my insurance license. But when I touch my insurance license, I look at that certificate. It's like, what, I'm doing this for you, granddad. Like, you and I are connected by this, by this license. And it just makes me feel a little bit different. It gives me a little bit different perspective in life. And then, so I want to have that for my children. It's like, who knows, maybe my grandchildren might, like my kids might not become in financial, but my grandkids might. And it's like, we're doing what our grandfather did. It's like, it brings this bond back, and it brings this sort of perspective and purpose. When it comes to who to run this family office, it can have a number of different things. It's all going to be dependent on its size. If it's going to be a relatively smaller one, it can be anything from an estate lawyer to an RIA or a registered investment advisor or an IROC advisor here in Canada. These will have wealth planners, estate planners. But as you start to get larger and larger, you'll start to get more professionals. Like you can get an estate accountant, estate lawyer, and you get even bigger. You can have like a full-time estate planner or a full-time money manager to manage your wealth. So it really depends on the size of your portfolio. You can definitely go to an estate lawyer that will craft your will and then will dictate how the trust is set up. You can also go to a brokerage firm to assist you with that wealth planning.
Thank you very much. Anybody have some questions? Y'all know how this works? Anybody want to set one up? Encouraging you to ask questions.
No, I had a question. So since you're Canada based, you could not do anything in the US then. We'd have to find your equivalent here, right? In the US?
Yeah. See, I can't even do anything in Canada anymore. I took all my licenses down. So I'm a former IROC advisor. So that's in the US, that's an RIA. So I was a licensed stockbroker. I used to work for BMO Nesbitt Burns. This was after I was a private equity partner. So I worked right in the heart of the finance. So Toronto is the financial center of Canada. Bay Street is where we manage all our money. It's the top of all the financial professionals in the country. It's our Wall Street. My wife is still a licensed stockbroker. She works for RBC Dominion Securities, which is the largest brokerage firm in Canada. So her and her boss, I think they run like 250 million. So it's a significant portfolio.
So we'll have to find somebody like you here. What if we don't find somebody like you here?
A lot of it is based on referral, right? So you'll start hanging out with like-minded people with the same net worth, and you'll start coming across the same money managers, right? So I'm okay. So I'm 100% biased. So in Canada, if you're ultra high net worth and you're not at RBC Dominion Securities, I would be a little surprised of why you are where you are. So RBC, like most of the high net worth clients end up at RBC. Like all the celebrities, all the hockey players, they're all managed by RBC Dominion Securities. Oh, so here's a good answer to that too. While you're interviewing money managers, the question you want to ask them is, how big is their entire portfolio? What is their smallest client? And what is their biggest client? And what is their average client? You don't want to be somebody's biggest client, and you don't want to be somebody's smallest client. You want to be right in their sweet spot. So say you have a $10 million portfolio and they say like, our average client is 100 million and you're a $10 million portfolio, you won't get any service. When you call up, you're going to get an associate. You're not going to get them being money manager. But at the same time, if you go to a small brokerage firm and $10 million and their biggest client is 5 million, the next biggest client is 5 million and you're 10 million, they're not going to have the right solutions for you. You've got to take a look for somebody where you're right in their sweet spot for the firm as well as for the actual advisor themselves.
That's who we would need to meet. Yeah, well, most of us don't run in those circles because most of us are not in that world.
Exactly.
We don't know in the world of building and where you run into those people.
Right. I mean, I can't even find a CPA who knows anything about my damn investments, or a financial plan. Cliff is laughing because he's heard me talk on the phone. My language has become bad since I moved to Florida. Or a financial planner who's a fiduciary, but will only give me advice on buying more stocks. And that is one thing I do not do anymore since I learned about alternate investments. So, I won't find anybody like you who I like. I don't like most people. So there we go. I'm doomed.
Yeah.
You're not doomed, Seema.
Yeah.
You're very diversified in what you do. You just need to find somebody who can understand everything that you have your hands in right now.
Yeah, you've got to go to the right country clubs and start rubbing elbows with it. So here's an interesting thing. So instead of using country clubs, I'll tell you the real thing that you do. Start going to a lot of charity galas and start hanging out with them and look for the right high net worth people. That's where you're going to find them. So I sit on the board of a charity, for an example, and as a board member, I started Googling the people that some of my co-chairs or co-board members. as well as start taking a look at some of the major supporters of that charity. And there's no less than 2 family offices that are major supporters of the charity, and there's another 2 people on the board itself that are family offices, right? So that's where. So one of the things I talk about foundations. So my mentor told me that, Ed, sitting on boards is where high net worth people do their networking. We don't go to free networking events. We don't go and hobnob to like meetups and things like that. Where the ultra high net worth people go to network, they network in foundations. Like the largest foundation in Canada, for an example, one of the largest ones is the Princess Margaret Foundation. Right, so it's oncology here in Toronto. That board has probably got 10, if not 20 family offices that are supporting that board. So that's just an example of one. It's very difficult for you to get into that chair, or it's certainly a notable member of Princess Margaret. But there's other charities that you can look at and start attending some charity galas, start taking a look at that, and you'll find that there's a lot of people there with some high net worth, and that's where you can start to ask them what are the kind of investments that they believe in. If they say, oh, we believe in a lot of real estate syndications, for an example, or we're big real estate players, like, oh, who do you go for accounting? And then use their accountant, because they've already, you don't have to reteach an accountant how to do it all. Go to somebody who already is used to and experienced in doing that.
I
Marcy.
think Marcy has her hand up.
Yes, well, I got muted somehow. Marcy,
Marcy,
you're
you're
muted?
muted.
Okay. Today I was a stockbroker many years ago, and then afterwards I became a securities analyst. Actually, I was treated totally differently in the offices by the other gentlemen. But today, if you're selling insurance, if you are selling stocks and bonds, they call themselves financial advisors. They are nothing more than what they were when I was a stockbroker, a broker, an agent. He's out there to move the stock because he or she gets a commission for selling stocks or bonds or insurance. So stop kidding yourself about the nomenclature that they use today. A financial advisor is usually someone who has a wide scope of understanding and education in different areas of finance, and they can help you understand or choose the right areas to be in. And but this financial advisor stuff is, to me, is nonsense, and they fool a lot of people by using that term. So just be aware of who does what when they in the financial arena.
Thank you, Marcy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to ask the right questions. So what about,
I am aware. And I'm going to fire my CPA and my financial advisor by the end of the year. My husband doesn't know that. He gets traumatized when we change CPAs.
So wouldn't a money
So-
manager be more the financial advisor, or do I have money manager mixed, or they're not
Yeah,
called
that's an
money
interesting-
managers, they're called the ones that give you the advice on what to invest in, that in your family office. Aren't those the money managers, the wealth managers?
That's an interesting point, Marcy. And there's a lot of different terminology that's being put in, a lot of developments and changes happening in the industry. One of the first developments, and I agree with Marcy, is that from the 80s and 90s, stockbrokers, they really changed their name to financial planners, and a lot of the times their activities never really changed. And really what it was is that they're just product pushers. So if you actually get into a brokerage firm, every morning there's something called morning call. And a morning call, it's an analyst that goes in and talks about the stocks that we're going to push today. And these, a lot of the times, it's pushing things that the firm itself has bought or has created a bought deal. And they're trying to promote these companies. So we've got to sell it to the clients. So really you are just product salesmen. But they changed it throughout the 80s and 90s, or really definitely through the 90s. They started to call them financial planners, but really nothing all that much changed. There were some late pushes as I started to enter into the industry in the early 2000s and through the mid 2000s to switch it from commission-based remuneration to fee-based. So my wife, for an example, their firm is their entire book of business is fee based. So you pay me a flat fee. Usually the fee is somewhere between 1.5% to 1%, depending upon how big your portfolio is. And then that starts to migrate a little bit more to overall wealth planning, because now it's discretionary. Whether I buy and hold or whether I trade, it doesn't cost you any kind of difference. It's just one flat fee. Now, the next piece to get to, that if you're having your account managed in this way, is starting to look for terms like EFPS, estate and financial planning, right? EFPS is estate and financial planning services, and start to get into legacy planning. Say, okay, so instead of just what is my portfolio going to go do this year, what is my portfolio projected to do in 5 years, in 10 years, like all the way up? It's supposed to go all the way up to retirement. So depending on how old you are, the first question should be is like, okay, well, where do you want to be in retirement? And once we get to retirement, let's forecast how big your portfolio is. Now, if your portfolio starts looking so large that it's going to have more money than you'll ever need in retirement, now it switches to legacy planning. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Is when we forecasted somebody, okay, you want to retire at 65. I was like, okay, great. I run those forecasts and I tell you, if we've invested the way that we do and you continually add these funds on an annual basis, we'll end up at X when you're 65. When you're 65, let's just say we'll end up at 10 million. Now, from 65 to 95, you think you'll ever spend more than $10 million? And if the answer is no, then how much do you think you won't spend? How much do you think that you'll have left over? It was like, well, I'm pretty sure I won't need another 3 million. I'm pretty sure I won't exceed 7 million. Great. Then 3 million is put aside for complete legacy planning. That is the birth of a family office. I call a family office, right? It's not quite a family office, but I'd say it's once you start to switch to legacy planning, it's like now this 3 million is for your future generations. What is the best thing I can do to preserve it? Well, the first risk is after money mindset. The first thing after that is the biggest risk to this amount of money is taxes. In your final tax return is probably the biggest tax bill you're ever going to pay unless you become very intentional with managing your final taxes. So we start to assist. What is our strategy for tax strategy? And if you have a really good financial planner or a really good investment advisor, we call them investment advisors in Canada. I think the US uses RIA. Or if you have a really good estate planner, they'll be able to tell you how they're going to mitigate and lower their taxes. Because I would be able to show you, without me, this is how much taxes you're going to pay. With me, this is the difference. And this is how much you're going to save. And this is how much is going to go to your kids. So if we now have a tax efficient bequeath to or inheritance to the next generation, now we take a look at is that going to be big enough to create its own entity where the kids can live off that cash flow instead of each one of them getting a lump sum. So that's the next steps.
That's great. So we had, I don't think you were here when we had Mark Gartlett on, who's an estate attorney here in California. And he talked about, because someone on this call asked about, he wanted to give things to his children rather than setting up a trust like what you might be talking about. And he was just telling him how to set up a trust so that it would always be for his son. If the son were to get married and get divorced, that would still be protected. But what you're talking about sounds a little different than that.
Yeah, there's another strategy that you can employ that will talk about preserving family legacy through the family tree. So with my $25 million lottery winner, my client came to me. He was a little nervous. He said, "Ed, I have 2 kids. I have 2 sons, and one of my sons has no backbone." I'm like, "What do you mean?" It's like, we do not like our daughter-in-law. I was like, well, how bad can she be? It's like, well, after we won the lottery, we bought this giant house, and she came to our house. What the first thing she said when she stepped into the foyer was, "I'm really going to love living in this house when you guys are gone." That's what she said to them. I'm like, holy smokes. And she's like, "We are afraid that when we're gone, our son is going to inherit 50% of our wealth, and our daughter-in-law is going to divorce him and take a quarter of this wealth. And then a quarter of your wealth is going to end up in a completely separate family. She's going to get remarried, and now a quarter of your entire wealth is going to end up in a completely different family." And that's one of the risks. It's how do you prevent that from leaving, and how are you going to make sure that money stays with your grandkids? So there's a trick that you can use is you can start using life insurance. to ensure that the wealth stays within the family. So you can dictate where it goes. So on top of being a licensed investment advisor or financial advisor, I was also an insurance license. So it's having all these kind of mindsets. So as a private equity guy, which is alternative investing, stock, which is pretty much the traditional, as well as life insurance, utilizing for family office. And what you can do is, as the patriarch of the family office, you can take out a policy. And at Sun Life, was where I used to work. Sun Life, you can take out a policy on somebody and insure somebody as young as 30 days. All they have to do is survive 30 days and you can put an insurance policy on them. So you can put a policy on your grandkids and for the benefit of your great grandkids that don't even exist right now. So say you just had a grandkid, 30 days, you put them as a life insured. I'm going to pay for it. I'm paying it out of the family trust. It's going to pay for the life insurance policy. The beneficiary is first going to be me. And then the secondary is going to be that child's parents. And then after that child's parents, the third alternative beneficiary is when that grandkid has another kid. That's going to be the next. That's going to be the next beneficiary. So if my daughter-in-law leaves the family, this money still stays within the bloodline, decades, if not centuries after you're gone. And you can now go as far as your great grandkids, which don't even exist right now. You can go to 4 generations, and it's all tax efficient as well.
Wow.
And outlining that would be this kind of thing you'd want to put in the family constitution, right? Because like that would otherwise seem like witchcraft after 2 generations, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like it'll be so far gone because imagine how the world has changed from your grandparents or even your great grandparents till today. My grandparents never even saw an iPhone, and it's a completely different world. Right. So you take a look at it, and I was watching with great interest the whole Hilton in Paris. Like Paris through the 90s was a disaster. She was like the butt of all jokes. And I think that she's really recovered quite well. And now keep in mind, she's acting a lot like her great grandfather and her grandfather. They were just crazy playboys. She's just the female version of of past generations. But because I think her grandfather was like dating Zsa Zsa Gabor, and it was just this big, this big chaotic, mess in Hollywood, and it's very similar. But she's really turned things around right now, and I think that I suspect you will never find out. But I suspect that there's been a lot of family, PR specialists that have been hired to really work with her to really pull that sort of name around, so it doesn't really tarnish the Hilton brand, right? So I think there was a point where they completely emancipated her and tried to fracture her off their brands, like her brand and her when she was still on the runway and walking on the runway, completely distanced themselves from the hotel chain. But now she's really starting to change her image. And she's really got a long-staying power. It's a very fascinating sort of story to see that happen. Fascinating family, fascinating. And I think that there's a lot of professionals that have been really coaching them and helping them out. And these are the people that work behind the scenes. So it's very similar to what you can provide as well. Take a look at, like if you're managing family office money, one of the things that I used to do is take a look at professionals that would be incredibly important and valuable to the success of the company. So I actually had a lot of people like healthcare provider, mental health specialists, executive matchmakers, fertility doctors, event planners, anything that you think that this family will need, because just go to somebody's family gathering for Thanksgiving or for Christmas. Every single family has some form of dysfunction, and you add 100 million underneath it, it just makes the dysfunction even more twisted. So you got to go out and help them. And ensure that and find the right professionals to make sure that this family stays on the right tracks.
So
I think Seema has a question too.
Yeah, she does, but I'd like to interject on that same subject. So I'm friends with Pierre DuPont, and I was very curious about the DuPont family because they are a family office and there are quite a few children. So I wanted to know more about how they did their family office meetings. And Pierre married another family office daughter. And so they have 2 family offices they have to meet every year. And there is a point, he says, where you have to divide off. But right now they have the DuPont family lives all over the world. So they do a meeting every year, but he says only about 700 and some people show up for that one. And then his wife's family gets together, and he says they're a lot of fun. So they party. There's about 300 and some of them that get together. But he's really specific about how the families, the meetings they have and the things they go out over And I don't know why all the family doesn't show up, but they do that meeting every single year because it's important for the family to know what's still going on with the family, because they all inherited from the great-great-grandfather who started this, like your grandfather did, great-grandfather did. So
Yeah.
like that.
And I think it's really important. Can you imagine when you have those annual family meetings, and that's a great time to reread that family constitution as an homage to the how the money was made, but also as a reminder, as before we make these decisions, let's keep in mind how and respect and honor how it was made, and that's part of it, right? That both for an interesting question of when do you fracture off a family office, and I participated with this as well. One of the families that I was working with, it was getting into second generation heading to the third. And in the second generation, what ended up happening is that there's two brothers, and that one brother had one son, and then the other brother had a son and a daughter. And I was working with the three of them. And when I started to realize the amount of money that the three of them were managing was significant enough, and it was always going to be one vote, and then the other two had a quarter vote, and they equaled to 50. And that made it a little awkward because there's three of them, and the other two felt that it should be split. The voting should be split by a third. But the other brother was saying, you know, I manage half of this family, right? And I sensed that there was a little bit of tension there. And that's yet another reason. But the tension really came from the direction of the three families. One had different perspectives and different values were starting to develop out of the evolution of that original constitution. You can start to develop into different ways, and the three of them didn't see eye to eye. And the wealth now was significant enough where we could break it off and still maintain economies of scale. So I made the recommendation. It's probably a good idea to now break it off and start two family offices, so you don't have to run the other two by your two cousins, and this one don't have to run by this cousin. They're like, oh, we can't make a decision until we can bring this cousin in. It's like, you know what? Now that the brother and sister can start to think closely together, and this one brother can just make the decisions that he wants. And it was like throwing off chains. He could make all the decisions that he wanted.
Thank you. Seema.
Yeah. So did your lottery winner happen to be an Indian? Because I'm sure that sounds like one of my in-laws' daughter-in-law who happens to live in Toronto. But anyway, that was just my being nasty to my in-laws. You figure I don't like them. But there is nobody like you who does what you do in the US, because Canada has many more regulations. I was a couple of weekends ago in Florida only. I was at a meeting at a conference, and everybody there were very high network people. I think we must have been the lowest, and there were a couple of billionaires too. And I really talked in that, and I met a bunch of people who do certain things in estate planning and all. But there was nobody like you. There was no one person who could guide anybody. So it is really, and now you're really making me miss Canada, which is why I put in the comments that if I make the money, I'll move back. I have a Canadian passport, so you can manage it. But if anybody here in our meetings, if they know somebody, it's like a one-shop thing. They should share it with everybody, because I have not found that there's one person who can give the kind of advice. I mean, you've told me more in this meeting than my spending hours talking to all those idiots at that meeting. That meeting of 400 people. So
maybe that's a question for you, Edmund, is who would you recommend Seema would talk to? Because she's invested in so many different asset classes. And she has, if I remember, 2 CPAs that you work with. Each one has a different skill set, and they provide different levels of advice based on her investments. And she really just wants to find one person that understands everything that she does and can manage what she's doing.
Yeah, Cliff, that's a great question. It's, that's a great challenge to have. And I started to discover that finding the right people or finding the right professional is incredibly hard to find. And a lot of times, I guess, and I really appreciate your kind words. Thank you so much, because I do take for granted that, what I know, because I get to see myself in the mirror every day, and it seems like, everybody knows what I know, right? And especially, I have a 13-year-old son, and to a 13-year-old, I'm the stupidest person on the planet. So it's really, it's really validating that you comes like, oh, you actually know what I'm talking about, and trying to find somebody with these things. I think a big part of it is taking a look at where they work, right? So a lot of the firms that I worked for, I was very intentional with where I work. First off, I wanted to make sure that it's downtown on Bay Street in the financial district. So I wanted to learn from the best. But at the same time, I didn't want to stay too long in one place. I didn't want to stay too long at Nesbitt. I didn't want to stay too long at Sun Life. Like, my Sun Life manager had been at Sun Life for 20 years. And I recognized, he has a very narrow perspective of money management. It's all skewed. It's biased. And when I worked at Nesbitt, it's also biased. And when I worked in private equity, it's also biased. But they do have value. They do have really good perspectives, but it's just tainted. And I want to get a broader vision, a broader view of everything together. And that's how you really service a family office quite well. So I think a big part of it is if you're trying to look for a really good professional, is to start asking around, start hanging out with people with the same challenges, start talking with people with the same asset classes or similar asset classes, and try to find people or talk to what professionals do they work with, and try to look at. And I think a lot of the Canadian law firms, a lot of the Bay Street law firms will have people in those circles as well.
Thank you. Seema, you have another question?
No, I was, I can't say anything straight. I have to joke. So
Okay.
there's no such thing as Main Street. It is Young and Bay. So go on.
Lisa Prince, you had your hand up previously. Do you have a question?
He answered the question for me. I just wanted to say to him that this has been really, really interesting. And I was just talking to my son about this, and to come on today and to see that what I'm thinking is something that you're giving to us, Peggy. It's wonderful. And I'm thankful for the group, and I'm thankful for the young man that brought us information that, I'm thinking about my grandkids, because even with me leaving and going home to Guyana, my children have no interest in going to Guyana. They're like, the Wi-Fi is shoddy. No, we're not going.
Okay.
No. So
Right.
it's really good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Lisa. Thank you, Edmund. Marcy, you got another question, comment? You're on mute again. You're muted, hon. Marcy, you're muted.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Edmund, what is your role in terms of what do they call you in the industry? A person like you working with family offices. And then how long do you stay with any one group of family offices?
Sure, that's a great question. So what they call me is an outcast. So I'm no longer licensed. I'm no longer in the industry. I don't have any families that I manage money for. I don't manage money at all, period. And really what I basically do is that I manage our own family wealth. So I've amassed all this knowledge, and I'm just using it for our own family benefit. And so you can't actually hire me anymore. So that's the great thing. So it's tough to find me, but I'm glad to actually have me to manage our money. And so I think that what was your second question again? It was
how long do you stay when you were working
how long do you,
with a family office and they hired you? Did they hire you specifically to manage money or their whole portfolios, manage some of the people in the group, so that you could do it with a little bit of pleasure rather than trying to have people have the same opinions, which they don't.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So I think a big part of it is it's really a two-way street. It's a relationship. So for me, have I fired clients? Absolutely. I have left family offices is because I would kept telling them what to do till I was blue in the face and they wouldn't listen. So one of the family members like completely disagreed and they were discounted. And they, once gossip starts to spread behind your back, it's like, you know, Ed is trying to destroy our family. That's the time to leave. Right. It's like, you know what? I'm not here to steal your money. I'm here to genuinely try to help your family succeed. But if your family doesn't want it, I will give you a warning. This is not the direction to go down. This is how you're going to end up with shirt sleeves. And I'm sorry that I don't agree with this. And it's probably best that I move on because I have a reputation to maintain. Because if you come back as like Ed drove our family down to the, to the ground and we have nothing left over, it's because of him. It's like, you know what? I don't want to be at the steering wheel when that happens. Like, so I can tell you that if you're going to go down this road, it's not going to end well. And if you don't listen, then it's probably best that we part as friends. And that's a good time to leave. So that's one of them. Another time is that you can get fired, or if you recognize, you know what, this family is starting to exceed my skill set. Right. So do I have the skill set to run a multifamily family office? Yeah, probably. But if it gets into like, I have no idea how to run Bain Private Equity, which is Mitt Romney. Like, I don't run an institution. I don't have that kind of experience. So if you're like 200 million, I'm probably not the guy. Right. It's probably wise for me to step out because I don't want to wear egg on my face. Let me introduce you to some people that can run an institution like that.
Thank you. Nika.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I really enjoyed listening to you. I was going to say to everyone, I guess what you had said was a RIA is kind of the closest thing to what you did here, the registered investment advisor. But a lot of times I found, I just talked to one recently that did include real estate. So I'm having more of a conversation with him, but it is hard to find that. So I was told a long time ago that the best thing is really to get a tax strategist instead of a financial planner, because, it's from that point, like you said about the taxes, because everyone's always chasing, what's the biggest returns, but they forget about the fact that if you can keep your taxes or lower your taxes, that you can, that's 30% return right there. So the tax strategies are kind of even better to do. But anyway, so I've been all about learning about tax strategy this year. But and to SEMA, I mean, you might not always get it in one person. And I mean, as much as you'd like to have it, it's like he was even saying that he puts a team together for the family office for event planning, for whatever. I mean, and just trying to amass and get them on board and have them. I had someone tell me that before, that they had their team, even though it was multiple people, but they would have meetings to have their whole team talk together. So they would have the accountant, they would have the lawyer, and they would have meetings with all of the people, strategic people, to be on the same page. So that might be a solution for you, that if you couldn't find it in the one person, that you get several people, but you make sure that they're all working together for the good of,
but that is also hard to find too.
No.
Here.
So that's a very valid point. So I think that one of the things that I've been missing is trying to explain to people, Nika, you're absolutely right. For most family offices, there's going to be one alpha position. So one alpha advisor that could be licensed in one of the seats or not, that will advise or will bring in all the other relationships, because it's impossible to have all the, like, as soon as you get larger, it's impossible to have all the licenses. You got to have an insurance license, an RIA license, like a Series 7. You've also got to have estate planning. Then you've got to have a CPA, and you've got to have a lawyer that's called to the bar. It's impossible to get one person with all these things. So it's one person that understands enough of them to be able to oversee them. So Nika, to your point is, if you have an advisor or somebody claiming to know that they know about your other asset classes, one of the things to ask is, what is their remuneration schedule? Okay, so how much are they getting paid, and what do they get paid to manage for you? And chances are that's what they're going to have a bias towards. So if you're an RIA, I'll have a bias towards selling you stocks. And when I was a licensed investment advisor, I also had an insurance license that the firm wanted me to have to be able to explain it. But I would be making a quarter of that commission than I would if I was working at an insurance firm. Right. So when I work in an insurance firm, I get 100% of the commission. When I work at an investment brokerage firm selling stocks, I only make 25%. That's why very little insurance policies are sold by insurance advisors or by investment advisors here in Canada. It's because they don't focus in on it. right? I realized that, it's going to be an afterthought. And if I really wanted to learn about the insurance side of things, I have to go to an insurance house, which I went to Sun Life, which is the largest insurer in Canada, right? And then learn it properly from them. But once again, when you learn it from them, they have a bias towards just insurance. And instead of getting investments, get it into a universal life insurance policy. Don't get it through a stockbroker. It's like, well, they're biased towards that. So you've got to be able to have a foot in it. And so I was basically training myself to become the alpha position at a family office. And I know it's like, this is the tax accountant. This is let's let the insurance advisors talk. And then once he starts talking about investments, I stop him and say, hey, you're starting to get oversight. We'd like to talk to the investment advisor for these stocks. Please just keep to your lane, and then split, like just figure out what lanes are people supposed to be in and make sure that they stay in those lanes.
Right.
So,
and
Seema,
like
your
you said
answer-
about the
and if
fees,
you-
like the
if you're
fee
not-
based too, instead of commission,
Yeah.
that you find somebody that is gonna, they're there, you're giving them a fee to manage or to talk about how it all comes together, and not that they're getting commissions from things.
Right.
So
So there are fee-based advisors in Canada that don't sell investment products. So they don't make any kind of, they don't actually buy it for you. They just create the plan, and then you pay them a fee to create that plan, and you do it on an annual basis. So I have one of my friends who left the industry who's a fee-based planner now that does that, right? So that's an example that would be less biased. And I would agree, that's probably not a bad idea. So for Seema, I guess that as your family is growing, your net worth is growing, you're the alpha position. You're the one that is supposed to bring in all those relationships and keep them in their lane.
She has to like them first.
Well, yeah.
write a book.
Yeah. You know what? You're not the first person that's told me to do that, but I think that I'll wait for a publisher to ask me to do it first. I don't want to self-publish. Like if a publisher comes and asks me to write something, I might do something for them.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Edmund.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.